Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. My name's Jack Mulder. I teach philosophy here at Hope, and I'm the assistant director and co-founder of the St. Benedict Institute. If you don't know, the St. Benedict Institute is the Catholic intellectual and spiritual institute that serves Hope College. It aims to bring a distinctively Catholic voice to Hope College and its conversations about faith. St. Benedict Institute's mission is spiritual, intellectual, and ecumenical. Our speaker tonight, you may have heard of him, is Dr. Jared Ortiz, the Laverne and Betty Van Clay Professor of Religion and the chair of that department, along with being the executive director and co-founder of the St. Benedict Institute. If you're like me, I grew up watching movies foretelling the kind of dystopian future we were courting with our technology. In my darker moments, I still worry that Skynet is coming to get us. Of course, paradoxically, these movies cost hundreds of millions of dollars to make, and no doubt made a lot of use of at least the precursors to AI technology. At this point, AI seems to be on everyone's minds, in the educational world certainly, and it certainly has changed things, not always for the better. And we need some guidance on this, and it's usually a good idea, or at least I think we would turn here at Hope, to start turning to our own Christian tradition. We'll find some help in Dr. Ortiz's talk, which is titled The Monk and the Machine, How St. Benedict Can Help Us Preserve Our Humanity in the Digital Age. The talk today is supported by the Lumen Christi Institute, with funding from the John Templeton Foundation. It is also co-sponsored by the Office of the Provost, the Dean for Arts and Humanities, the Character Forward Grant, the Philosophy Department, and the Religion Department. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Jared Ortiz.
Well, thank you, Jack, and thank you all for coming out on this chilly night. There are handouts in the back. If you didn't get one, please get one. I was invited to give a version of this talk a few months ago, and in the meantime, I've been doing a lot of reading, and I feel like my thought on this has actually really deepened. So tonight, you are going to get a deeper talk, but that also means it's going to be a longer talk. When my priest, Father Nick, goes on with the long homily, sometimes I just close my eyes and really try to take it in, and sometimes I'm accused of maybe dozing off or sleeping during Mass, but I like to call it resting in the Lord. And if you need to rest in the Lord tonight, feel free. I won't be offended. But also, if you do get bored, there's lots of great quotes in the handout. There's lots of great stats and graphs at the end of the handout you can look at to pass the time. Do not, but don't take out your phone. God is watching. Okay. Going forward, there will be only two ways of living: the artificial way and the ascetic way. And the difference between these two ways is great. Either we will be devoured by our own devices and become machines, or we will practice asceticism and imitate the monks so we can carve out a small refuge of humanity. These two ways of being arise from two competing ways of thinking about reality: technology and theology. Artificial intelligence and what we might call ascetic intelligence. Technology or theology, artificial life or ascetic life, these are the options before us. And this talk will explore these competing approaches to reality: the artificial intelligence flowing out of Silicon Valley and the wisdom flowing from the monastic tradition, especially the wisdom of St. Benedict. Let me begin with a brief linguistic note. When I say technology, most of us think of the machines and devices we enjoy and benefit from today: cell phones, computers, MRI machines, drones, the Roomba. When we think of technology as these kinds of things, we tend to think that technology is a neutral tool that we use. But technology is not a neutral tool. Technology is a worldview. It is an approach to reality. And our modern technology is not something we use, but something that increasingly uses us. Technology is a way of viewing reality through the lens of artifice, through what we have made. Contrast this to theology, another logi, theology, which is a way of accounting for reality from the point of view of God, or seeing the world as God made it. Technology and theology both make claims about the nature of God and the world, about human beings and their destiny. So let me try to spell out these two approaches as clearly as possible here, and then I'll explain them in the rest of the talk. So in the technological view, did I say that? In the technological view, the goal is to create God, merge with God, and therefore become God. Through technological prowess, we can conquer nature and live a life without limits. By conquer nature, I include conquering our own human nature. The goal is to transcend our biological limitations, or perhaps transcend biology itself, in order to live a life with augmented mental and physical powers, and eventually a life without suffering or death. The technological view envisions us living forever, either by keeping our bodies alive through technological advances or by preserving our consciousness in a machine. Ultimately, the goal is to replace nature with technology, to replace what God has made with what we have made. In the theological view, the goal is to worship God, have union with him, and be deified, that is, permeated with God's presence while always remaining his creature. Through God's grace, we can conquer not our human nature, but the vices that harm our nature. We accept our human limitations. We embrace nature and human nature as gifts from God. Since we are fallen, we must also embrace the more severe limitations of asceticism, self-discipline, which heal our wounded nature and restore our humanity. We also embrace death, both ascetic dying to self as well as human mortality. Only by accepting the limits of both forms of death will we live forever, receiving eternal life as a gift from the one true God. In this talk, I will first reflect on the aspirations of the founders of modern science and how these find their fulfillment in the digital age. Then I'll reflect on St. Benedict, and specifically, I'll focus on how ascetic practices learned from St. Benedict can preserve us from the idolatry and anti-human agenda of our tech gurus. To understand the achievement and aspirations of contemporary AI technology, it's important to reread the 17th century founding fathers of modern science, Francis Bacon and René Descartes. From the beginning, the question for science was how to approach reality. In the New Organon, or True Directions Concerning the Interpretation of Nature, Bacon proposes a new way of thinking about nature, which interprets it as something to be conquered. It is conquered by using our minds mechanically and harassing nature until she reveals her secrets. The purpose is to subject nature to the empire of man in order to undo the effects of the fall, particularly sickness, suffering, and death. Bacon founds his new science on evidence and demonstration. For him, this means experimenting on nature, which we should not observe free and unconstrained, this quote is on your sheet, but confined and harassed. We see Bacon's approach to understanding. We learn more about things not by seeing them alive, whole, and in action in their own habitats, but by examining them dead, dissected, and artificially constrained in a laboratory. Bacon continues with an important exhortation. He says, "Pay no attention to men's disgust or what they find attractive, since nature reveals herself more through the harassment of art than in her own proper freedom." The practice of disregarding our natural disgust has been key to the success of the modern scientific project, which has required dissecting animals while they are still alive and digging up recently buried human bodies. Now, this sort of thing is conceivable for Bacon because the new science, as Michael Hanby notes, regards nature as a kind of machine. Right? We regard nature as a kind of machine, and therefore the knowledge of nature, our science, as a kind of engineering. Note Bacon's comment about perfecting human thinking by making it operate like a machine. Perhaps it's this kind of mechanical view of the mind that leads Bacon to say his most famous line, "Knowledge is power," and its corollary, truth and usefulness, are the very same. Knowledge is not about seeing the world as God made it, and truth is not about conforming our minds to reality. Rather, knowledge is discovery of hidden powers, and truth is success in using these powers to benefit ourselves. Again, it's not just nature out there that is a machine to be tinkered with, but we ourselves, who are also understood as machines. For Bacon, the task and purpose of human power, he says, is to extract powers from things and then to turn some things into other things for our own benefit. The only limits to this new science is what is possible. Now, Bacon may sound like a magician or a mad scientist, and science and magic were twins at this time, but his intentions are largely benevolent. He desires all these things to be a benefit to human beings. He wants to repair the effects of the fall. Now, while differing in method, Descartes shared similar goals to Bacon. He says that through a renewed science, this on your sheet, we might render ourselves the lords and possessors of nature. And with admirable clarity, he prophesies the consequences of this lordship: the preservation of health, which he says is without a doubt of all the blessings of this life, the first and fundamental one, and that we could free ourselves from an infinity of maladies of body as well as of mind, and perhaps also even from the debility of age. The ultimate goal of their new science is to acquire power over nature so we can conquer death. In many ways, their goals are salutary, and the fact that half of us aren't dead already is evidence that we have benefited from the fruits of their vision. Yet there is a shadow side to these aspirations, one which finds paradigmatic expression in the Garden of Eden story. Recall that God plants a garden with two important trees: the tree of life in the midst of the garden, the heart of their Edenic home, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God gives them permission to eat of every tree, including the tree of life, but prohibits eating from the tree of knowledge. But by the time the woman is talking to the serpent, something has gone wrong. The woman conflates the two trees. The serpent exploits this confusion, assuring our first parents that they will not die when they eat the forbidden fruit, but that they will become like God, knowing good and evil. Very subtly, the serpent teaches humanity that God is wrong, knowledge is power, and transgression is life. This now becomes the pattern for human beings. God freely offers eternal life, but we try to do it on our own. Instead of letting God make us immortal through grace, we reach out and try to make ourselves immortal through another mechanism. In the garden, we eat and hope to be transformed into a god. Today, our science offers the same promise. We can eat from the tree of scientific knowledge to try to gain immortal life. Not through God's grace will we achieve immortality, but through technology. 400 years after Bacon and Descartes, we have the dramatic rise of AI, where we see the wildest dreams of these founders coming true. The makers of AI are very clear that they want to create God, have humans merge with this created God, and thereby become God ourselves. The goal is a life without limits, made possible through technological innovation. Now, lest I be accused of exaggerating, let's hear from some of the leading AI scientists. Hugo de Garis, a physicist and artificial brain researcher, says on your sheet, there's more computing capacity in that nanotech grain of sand than our human brain by a factor of billions. So these machines, if we decide to build them, we're building gods. Ray Kurzweil, Google engineer and tech prophet, says, so does God exist? Well, I would say not yet. Now, we might question whether they have an adequate understanding of God, but their intentions are clear. Build a godlike machine that surpasses collective humanity in every metric, which will then guide us all to a post-human or transhuman future. Once we build this machine god, the goal is to merge with it. Elon Musk thinks that we're already there. He says, all of us already are cyborgs. So you have a machine extension of yourself in the form of your phone and your computer and all your applications. You are already superhuman. Kurzweil says, as we merge with AI in this way, we will become a hybrid species. We will still be human, but will be enhanced by AI. Our machines are going to continue to shrink in size and gain power to the point where they are invisible and inside our bodies. As we merge with technology, we will no longer be limited by our biology. We will be free to live life without limits. Kurzweil's vision of a life without limits is not a vision for humans, but of some kind of God. The goal, as in the garden, is to reject the limits of being a creature and be gods unto ourselves. Peter Diamandis, an engineer and physician, says that we will achieve godlike attributes through AI. We humans are going to start linking with each other and become this meta-intelligence, he says. And we will eventually become an interconnection of the entire human race, and we will become godlike. He even says that we will acquire the powers of omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence. Creating God is a collective project. We all have something to contribute, and the result is exponentially greater than the individual. Yet each of us will partake of the superintelligence and have the omnipowers. We are the God we have been waiting for. For some, these divine powers extend to creating other persons and to resurrecting the dead. Ben Goertzel, computer scientist and AI researcher, says by the 2030s, AIs will be millions of times more intelligent than humans, so they could be assigned to create a person. Ray Kurzweil, long ago, stated his desire to resurrect his dead father. And reminding us of Bacon's exhortation to pay no attention to man's disgust, and aspiring to the body snatchers of old, Kurzweil says, we can find some of my father's DNA around his gravesite. That's a lot of information right there. The AI will send down some nanobots and get some bone or teeth and extract some DNA and put it all together. Then they'll get some information from my brain and anyone else who still remembers him. As of 2025, Kurzweil has made an AI replicant of his father, though the DNA extraction and recreation, one hopes, is still far off. So for now, these omnipowers extend only to the earth and clearly are still far inferior to any powers theists generally attribute to God. Still, if the AI prophets prophesy truly, we will extend our powers into the universe. Once again, in an eerie echo of Bacon, Kurzweil speaks of extending the human empire by imposing a cyborg face on all of nature and the galaxy. And ultimately, he says, information will be everything. In the future, everything will become intelligent. Nanobots will infuse all the matter around us with information. Rocks, trees, everything will become these intelligent computers. So at that point, we're going to expand out into the rest of the universe. Swarms of those will go out into the universe and basically find other matter and energy that we can then harness to expand the overall intelligence of our human-machine civilization. The end is not God being all in all, as Paul movingly describes in 1 Corinthians 15, but information permeating everything. Artificial humanity will infect the whole universe. Now, the modern idolatry of AI is a digitally enhanced version of ancient idolatry. It's the same rejection of creaturely limits, grabbing the fruit from the tree of knowledge and trying to become God without God. It's the same effort to build a tall tower so we can ascend to the heavens by our own ingenuity. It's the same impatience that led the Israelites to share their little bits of gold to throw into the fire until a golden calf emerged to guide them. The builders of AI are clear that they are trying to build an omni-powered machine deity, which presumably would benevolently rule over us. Though many of them are worried that it's not going to benevolently rule over us, but kill us. But anyway. But you might be asking, okay, what does all of this have to do with us? Yes, these Silicon Valley gurus are a bit out there, but having a smartphone and using AI at work seems a far cry from such idolatry. But let's think about our own part, our participation in this modern idolatry in two ways. First, simply, our use of these technologies funds their aspirations. They could not do it without our support. And actually, I meant to put this on your sheet, but I forgot. 6 of the 10 richest people in the world are transhumanists. Right, so you can Google this, like find the top 10. 6 of them are well-known transhumanists and support transhumanist causes. Second, and more difficult to see, the very medium of digital technology and the way we engage it is a tacit participation in the same idolatry. Let me try to unpack this. What is the first thing you do in the morning? What is the last thing you do at night? For many of you, the answer is check my phone. The average person spends 7 hours a day beholding a screen. Now, what does this mean? In his profound book, A Web of Our Own Making, the philosopher Anton Barbecue argues, all dominant media have attained sacred status, if not by being directly worshipped, then by capturing the terms in which worship is understood, the terms in which it is possible to express our longings for what is ultimate. We have given over our attention, our mind, our heart to these devices. We consult them for advice and knowledge. We seek comfort from them, and we find our meaning in them. They permeate our day, and we constantly refer back to them. We miss them when they are gone, and they fill us when they are present. This is perhaps how a pious monk might speak about God. The subtitle of Barbecue's book is The Nature of Digital Formation. Every technology shapes us, whether we know it or not, and digital technology shapes us in more profound ways than other technologies. Barbecue argues that digital technology is a new stage in technology, where we understand that what is natural, that is given as part of nature and as part of our human nature, is fused with what is artificial, with what is man-made. The appearance of digital technology marks the moment at which our tools or media are identified with our own conception of what is true, who we are, and what is good. When Elon Musk said that we're all already cyborgs, he's not talking about an aspiration. He's observing a fact that we, perhaps unwittingly, see our phones as an extension of our person. Barbecue explains why this happens. Because the digital transformation is not an event occurring at a distance, but a change happening through and within each one of us. We are the subjects and objects of this revolution. We undertake and undergo it. We find ourselves doing it as it happens. The more we use our digital technology, the more we merge with it, just as Silicon Valley intends. This may not be our intentional desire, but it is the effect of our regular use. We love our devices and pour ourselves into them because they are so perfectly responsive to our will. Right? Barbecue actually argues that digital technology is a natural technology in a new sense. And you can think about this, that a child can use a phone before he can speak or walk. That's a remarkable That's a remarkable machine. That's a remarkable device. It's more intuitive than walking. Our devices reflect us back to ourselves in the way we seemingly want. They are black mirrors. This is the magic of their addictive quality, but it is also the way we participate in the technological idolatry. The goal of all modern technology, Barbecue says, is to make a machine like us and to make ourselves like a machine, thereby becoming the makers of our lives. To be able to make ourselves is to become perfect in the sense of being self-caused and self-willed, that is, to be ourselves as gods. Now, this should not be surprising, right? The psalmist warned us long ago about the effects of idolatry. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of men's hands. They have mouths, but they do not speak. They have eyes, but they do not see. They have ears, but they do not hear, though actually all of our digital technology can do this in some sense. Those who make them are like them, so are all who trust in them. We become what we worship. We are transformed into what we love. If we love the machine, we will become machines. As Barbecue astutely notes, we love our own creations and then lose sight of them as ours. When you make what you want what you make. This is the picture of idolatry. Now, the danger is real on many levels. We are actively undermining our own humanity. The more we extend ourselves into our machines, the more we diminish our human capacities. A shortcut to any particular task might seem harmless in itself, but what is chosen now for convenience will eventually become necessity over time. When we shift from human doing to machine outputs, we lose something essentially human. At least in the way most of us will use it, AI is not a tool that extends our abilities, but a technology that replaces them. A hammer extends the power of my hand to build, and a knife extends my power to cut. They are tools that I wield, but artificial intelligence does not extend the power of my mind to think. It replaces it. As the machine increases, we decrease. We humans are building a machine, or a god, that devours our humanity. The more we feed it, the more it consumes us, and the more we are changed into it. We made this idol, and now we are becoming like it. In light of this rather gloomy prognosis, what is to be done? How should we respond to this situation? Now, the question most people are asking is, how do we responsibly use AI? But if we are dealing with a technology that consumes our humanity, then asking about responsible use is probably not the right question. It's like asking, how do we responsibly use crystal meth? Unless we are content to offer our humanity to a false god, there really isn't much responsible use. So what is to be done? While digital technology is new, its attendant idolatry and dehumanization are not. AI is a spiritual problem, and so requires a spiritual solution. We must seek and listen to the wisdom of those who have successfully resisted such temptations. Saint Benedict is one such wise voice. In the early 6th century, Benedict abandoned a decadent and dying empire, very similar to our own, to live in a cave for 3 years before God called him to found the monastic communities that would transform the world. So to formulate the beginnings of a spiritual response, we'll meditate together on Benedict's only written work, his rule for monks. Benedict begins his rule by saying, listen. Listen, O my son, to the precepts of the Master, and incline the ear of your heart. Willingly receive and faithfully fulfill the admonition of your loving Father, that you may return by the labor of obedience to him from whom you had departed through the laziness of disobedience. We fell by listening to the devil The path back begins by listening again, now to a teacher and father like St. Benedict, who loves us and knows the path back to God. In the garden, we fell by disobedience. We continue to fall through what Benedict calls the laziness of disobedience, a particularly apt phrase for our AI moment. Our disobedience to God is not always a fist-shaking transgression. Often it is merely a drifting away, a culpable forgetfulness, a letting go of the good. Now, it is certainly pride to claim that we are creating God in a lab. But for most of us, our idolatry and separation from God will occur through the inattention of scrolling, clicking, and swiping. The choice before us is either to passively allow our humanity to be unmade through the laziness of disobedience, or to actively recover it through the labor of obedience. So for Benedict, this listening must lead to interior transformation and then be embodied in a changed way of life. In chapter 4 of the Rule, Benedict lays out 72 instruments for good works to aid in this embodied work of transformation. Now, while not all the instruments of good works deal with asceticism, I have selected 3 ascetical precepts from Benedict's list. And again, these are on your sheet. To love fasting, to love chastity, and to daily keep death before one's eyes. I have chosen these 3 because they deal with the self-discipline required to live rightly with regard to eating, sex, and avoiding death, the most fundamental human desires related to self-preservation. These are, not incidentally, the same drives motivating the modern scientific project. But you might be asking, why, though, do we need asceticism at all? Why these precepts? Why do we need extra spiritual training and self-discipline? Isn't this just the special activity of monks? Louis Bouillet offers a striking explanation for why it is necessary for everyone to practice asceticism. The reason lies in sin. Sin has vitiated our relations with things by vitiating the natural attitude of our soul, our will. Turned in upon ourselves by the deepest tendency of our being, instead of tending directly to God, we relate everything to ourselves instead of referring all to Him. Sounds like our phone, right? That is why, in order to find Him again, it is essential to strip ourselves of ourselves. And it is to strip ourselves of ourselves that it is finally necessary to detach ourselves from everything created. Before the fall, all of creation pointed us to God. After the fall, we refer everything to ourselves, as though we were God. The modern scientific project and its AI manifestation is just one powerful expression of this primordial wound in the soul that spurs us to make ourselves the center of the universe. So if sin is the root of the problem, then asceticism is the response the Christian tradition offers us to remedy it. When Benedict lists the instruments of fasting and chastity, he says not only that we must practice them, but that we must love them. For Benedict, love, desire, is the key to our transformation. But fasting and chastity are not particularly lovable. Why should we love them? Let me give you a few reasons. First, we should love fasting and chastity because Christ fasted and Christ was chaste. We can love imitating Christ. Second, we should love what these disciplines do for us. Fasting teaches us self-control, and chastity brings about integration. We love being a better human. Third, the means that God has provided for our transformation should not merely be endured, but eagerly embraced, pursued, and ultimately loved. Fourth, Benedict knows that our desires need to be reordered. Desire draws us out of ourselves, and desire can either draw us into the world or into God. We should love fasting and chastity because these heal our desires, so we can love the right things in the right way, thereby being drawn into God. Lastly, loving these reminds us that it is not our own efforts that heal us, but God's grace. Only love, the presence of God in us, can make us love these disciplines, which can make us whole again. So to understand how fasting and chastity can help us resist being swallowed by AI, let's return to the garden. The first sin was disobedience that involved trying to be God through eating. The first consequence of disobedience was sexual disorder. Their eyes were opened and they saw they were naked. Eating transforms them, but not in the way they hoped. Disobedience to God results in the disobedience of our bodies and seeing things in a new way. If the first sin is disobedience with regard to eating, whose consequence is sexual disorder and a new approach to reality, then the path back to God will involve healing through fasting and chastity. Now, eating is a surprisingly ambiguous act. It means taking in something from the world, destroying it, and transforming it into ourselves. Omnivorous man, which is all of us, omnivorous man, the man who devours, omni, who eats any and everything. Omnivorous man is particularly ambiguous. Disordered eating is called gluttony. Often motivated by curiosity or by fear, gluttony is a compulsion to fill ourselves with the world. Our desire for sex, when rightly ordered, is a desire for fruitful, self-giving union. But when it is not rightly ordered, it is a desire for acquisition, conquering, and pleasure. With gluttony and lust, the world is seen as something to be appropriated, conquered, assimilated, even destroyed, and transformed into oneself. AI is a kind of apotheosis of this disposition toward the world. AI is the great consumer, the great transformer, the great assimilator. AI is the great illusion maker and desire fulfiller. How can fasting and chastity help us here? Let's start with fasting. Fasting is a bodily protest against AI. Fasting brings us to a state of non-assimilation. We become less dependent on the world. We take less of it in. We enter into a Sabbath-like state where we allow God's world to be. Now, fasting has many meanings in Scripture, which are relevant here. It's often connected with mourning a loss or penitence for wrongdoing, either personal or national. It's a sign of humility and a deliberate weakening of ourself before God. Fasting often accompanies supplication, and then along with almsgiving is considered the wings of prayer. Fasting is also preparation for seeing God. Moses and Elijah both fasted for 40 days before they saw God on their respective mountains. Not coincidentally, Moses and Elijah were privileged to see God's glory revealed in Christ's transfiguration. Jesus also fasted 40 days in preparation to confront the devil, for as he himself tells us, some demons are only cast out by prayer and fasting. In the early church, two key meanings of fasting get taken up: healing our desires and preparing for the bridegroom. Healing our desires, this idea comes from Paul. I discipline my body in order to keep it under control, 1 Corinthians 9:27. Those who belong to Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires, Galatians 5:24. The second meaning comes from Jesus himself, responding to the Pharisees, who question why his disciples don't fast. Jesus says, can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away, and then they will fast. The two meanings are related. Fasting is meant to heal the soul as preparation for meeting the bridegroom. So while we mourn Christ's absence now, our waiting is also infused with hope and a joyful longing for the marriage feast. Now, all these meanings suggest that fasting offers an important antidote to AI. The temptations of AI are and will be legion. I use that word deliberately. It will masterfully entice our desires and even create new ones. It will tempt us to offload more and more of our humanity for the sake of convenience. Fasting, though, will help to reorder our desires and discipline our bodies. Fasting gets us in the habit of sacrificing legitimate goods, like food, so we will be better prepared to resist whatever AI might offer. We might also fast in reparation for our online sins and those of our nation. You can look at the pornography use statistics at the back of the handout later. The physical humbling of ourselves is a salutary response to the hubris of AI enhancement. When the AI boom started a few years ago, Elon Musk said, "We are summoning the demon." And it is certainly a demon who teaches us that a machine can be God and tries to unmake our humanity. Fasting, along with prayer, will be necessary to exorcise this demon. Lastly, if fasting prepares us to see God and is related with our eschatological transfiguration, then it can help us recognize and resist the false idols and false transformations promised by AI. So as we noted earlier, food and sex are intimately related, and so too fasting and chastity. The monk, and now Bishop Eric Varden, says, it's on your sheet, the pursuit of chastity is inseparable from fasting, which we should understand not merely as disciplined eating, but as a psychobiological, psycho is soul, biological, the bodily part, right, as a psychobiological therapeutic healing practice of our liberation from self-centeredness. Fasting and chastity together heal us from our distorted attachment and engagement with the world. But the two are related for eschatological end times reasons as well. Just as fasting is preparation for meeting God, so too is chastity. Jesus tells us, "Blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God." Chastity is the virtue that reintegrates our fractured heart so that we can see God and we can see all things truly, the way God made them. We noted that the first consequence of the fall was a change in our way of seeing. Our eyes are opened. And we immediately became aware of our interior disintegration. Our body no longer responded properly to our soul. We're at war within ourselves, battered by unruly desires, and so we seek to conquer the world because we cannot conquer ourselves. This sinful disposition is called concupiscence. St. John describes this in 1 John. "For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world." Concupiscence is a way of viewing the world as a means to satisfying our own pleasure, curiosity, and ambition. It's a desire to grasp, to immerse ourselves in things, and to cling to them for their own sake. And AI will offer an almost unlimited scope for these desires, tailored perfectly to each individual. The more we pursue these desires, the more disintegrated we will become. And as we pursue the unreality of the AI world, we separate more and more from ourselves and our embodied reality. Our online lives tend toward fragmentation and a kind of docetism, right? The ancient heresy claiming that Christ didn't have a real body but only appeared to have one. Today, all of us have virtual bodies. We appear to be something online, but online bodies aren't really ours, even if we identify with them and fall in love with our own images. In our increasingly disembodied online life, fasting and chastity remind us that we're embodied. These are spiritual disciplines God gave us to reintegrate our body and soul. They train our desires. They remind us that to be human is to be a creature, to be limited. They remind us that infinite possibility is not good for us. They cultivate the disposition of non-acquisitiveness and non-manipulation that lets the world be and lets the soul rest. Finally, they are acts that only we can do, that transform us in the doing. God works in us when we fast and aspire to chastity, but it is we who must do these things. No machine can fast for us or integrate our desires. Okay. Memento mori, remember you are mortal, the third ascetic discipline. Benedict says that the monk ought to daily keep death before one's eyes. In light of technological advances, this classic memento mori seems more and more backward When one interview observed, "You seem to be at war with biology," Ray Kurzweil responded, "Biology has a lot of limitations. A lot of analysts feel there's nothing inevitable about dying. We're coming up with things to stop it. Basically, we can get rid of death through aging. It's better not to die." That's a good challenge in our modern age. Isn't accepting death just an outmoded way of thinking, like accepting the inevitability of leprosy or smallpox? We find ourselves today in the odd position of making the case for death. Or at least I find myself in that position. Can I do it? Can we do it? There are rational and practical arguments, the best of which come from a series of brilliant articles by Leon Kass. There, he thoughtfully explores whether more years would add any substantial happiness to our lives, or whether we would feel the weight of our actions or aspire to nobility without having a horizon to our life. But the real question, Kass says, is why do we desire immortality? Is it really a desire for more of this life? Is it a desire to just continue? Kass argues, and it's on your sheet, that man longs not so much for deathlessness as for wholeness, wisdom, goodness, and godliness, longings that cannot be satisfied fully in our embodied earthly life. The human taste for immortality, for the imperishable and the eternal, is not a taste that the biomedical conquest of death could satisfy. We would still be incomplete. We would still lack wisdom. We would still lack God's presence and redemption. Mere continuance would not buy fulfillment. Worse, its pursuit already threatens, human happiness by distracting us from the goals toward which our souls naturally point. By daily keeping death before our eyes, we stay focused on the horizon of our life. As the psalmist prays, "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain wisdom of heart," Psalm 90. It is the human horizon to our life that gives it meaning and that cultivates a wise heart, the only heart that can find happiness in this life and the next. Our technology, though, offers us days without number. This kind of life might be long, but it would not be good. It might give us information, but it would not make us wise. For the monastic tradition, death is the domain of the devil, and the devil needs to be defeated on his own turf. Jesus did not avoid death. He entered into it and transformed it. By his death, he trampled down death, and in his resurrection, he conquered it. We must follow him there. We must first die to ourselves in this life through asceticism. Dying to ourselves is preparation for bodily death at the end of life. By dying to ourselves and overcoming sin, we overcome the devil and we overcome death. By daily keeping death before our eyes, we also fix our gaze on the borderland between this life and the next. We keep our sights set on the path we must take to achieve true eternal life, the same one that Jesus trod. Our tech gurus want to prolong this life. Their goals are imminent. They fear death, and they seek to avoid it at all costs, even at the cost of their and our humanity. They want to transcend the limits of bodily reality. But death reminds us that we are a body. Anton Barbecue observes, "To die is to become a body that can be acknowledged only by being touched. And physical touch is the one sense we cannot reach online. To die is the opposite of being online." Perhaps this is one root of their fear. But we should not fear death so much as we should fear separation from God. Now, our tech gurus might object to this point, since there is no God, and since there is no God, there's no afterlife, and so nothing to fear except non-existence. So we should just prolong this life. In his poem, The Discreet Charm of Nihilism, the great Polish poet Czesław Miłosz writes about the fools who say in their hearts that there is no God. He's speaking about the communists that oppressed his country for so long. Religion, he says, used to be the opium of the people. To those suffering humiliation, pain, illness, and serfdom, religion promised the reward of an afterlife. But now we are witnessing a transformation. A true opium of the people is the belief in nothingness after death. The huge solace, the huge comfort of thinking that for our betrayals, our greed, our cowardice, our murders, we are not going to be judged. Perhaps we are trying desperately to avoid death so we can avoid the judgment of God. Conclusion. This talk has surveyed two approaches to understanding reality: AI, technology, and ascetic theology. One promises us super intelligence, super longevity, and super happiness in this world at the small price of our humanity. The other promises limitation, death, and suffering in this world, in exchange for sharing God's divine life in the next. The world will always choose the first. What will we choose? We become what we love. If we love the machine, we will become the machine. But if we love God, we will become God. This won't happen through striving or technology. It will only come by accepting our limits and allowing God to make us into the creatures he made us to be. It will only come through taking up our cross and following Jesus. AI is coming whether we want it or not. Like so many recent technologies, it will be imposed upon us by powerful forces, and either we will try to take some stand against it or we will be absorbed by it. I have proposed the ascetic path as the way we should take our stand. But we might ask, do our little acts of self-denial even matter? Certainly. Certainly they will matter to us, and they will matter to our friends and family near us. Certainly they will matter to God. But will they make a difference? God only knows. Benedict lived in a cave for 3 years until God revealed him to the world and used his way of life to bring light to the so-called Dark Ages. What he and his monks showed was that God was real and that a different way of life was possible. Similarly, today, the ascetic life lived for God can show that the machine is not ultimate reality. Beyond this world, beyond the digital world, there's another world, the real one, where all our longings find true fulfillment. Immanence is not the final word. There's a different structure to the cosmos. We did not make ourselves. A different way of life is indeed possible. Likely not many will join those who live this life, but that has always been the case. Only a few find the small gate and the narrow road that leads to life. It's only ever been creative minorities who have changed the world, if the world was to be changed. This might sound gloomy, but let me close with one more thought from St. Benedict. In one part of his rule, Benedict says, at all times, the life of a monk ought to be a Lenten observance. Gloomy. Asceticism reminds us that we are poor banished children of Eve, mourning and weeping in this valley of tears. We should not pretend otherwise. But asceticism also reminds us that this is only temporary. Benedict's perpetual Lent is infused with the joy of resurrection. We engage ascetic practices, he says, so that each may offer above his appointed measure and of his own free will something to God in the joy of the Holy Spirit, thus awaiting Holy Easter with the joy of spiritual desire. All of life, Benedict teaches, is a joyful anticipation of Easter, of the time when we will be one with the bridegroom. Through fasting and chastity and meditating on death, we prepare our hearts and bodies for union with him. We prepare ourselves for the time when he will wipe away every tear and will unite us so intimately with himself that we will be filled with all the fullness of God and shine like the sun in the kingdom of our Father. Thank you.
We have time for some questions.
Thank you for your talk. I would like to understand better how you see the definition of technology that you proposed in the beginning, where what I'm not sure of is to what extent it's a characterization of the things we currently classify as technology, which I suppose would include knives and axes and landline telephones and much else, or to what extent you're kind of stipulatively redefining technology to be what you said, leaving open to what extent that embraces those more humble modes of technology.
Yeah, I mean, technology is, so you look up technology in the Oxford English Dictionary, and it's defined as a branch of knowledge. I mean, that's the interesting thing. Technology is a fusion of techne and logos, right? And so it's theology, right? It's to give an account of these things. But because of its success, right, it's taken on this kind of global proportions of, what I call the worldview. So I mean, in the ancient world, you had techne, right? Skill, know-how, right? And you used tools in that techne, right? And those are things that you wielded. I think there is gray area about, what counts as a tool or how we should understand a tool and a technology. And so in one way, I don't want to propose any sort of hard and fast, categories or distinctions. But I do think it's true that, especially drawing on the Barbicane there, and then Hanby and others, that technology has for us become a worldview. It becomes the way that we sort of see, the way that we see the world and understand the world, right, through what we have made. I think this is, again, it's a kind of, in one way, it's a magnification of a temptation we always have, right? To make things, fall in love with them and worship them, and then to become like them, right? That's as old as idolatry. But again, given the great success and also the great goods that come with these with technology, it takes over more and more of our imagination and the way that we come to understand ourselves.
For the talk. So recently, it seems we've seen an increase in online evangelization. How do you think that fits into the technological theological framework?
Yeah, I mean, and this piggybacks in one way on the last question. I mean, I think in one sense there is a way in which technology is understood as a tool that we can use. It's a neutral tool we can use for good and evil, right? You can read the Gospels on your phone, or you could look at illicit images on your phone, right? So in one way, you can wield it in one way, like that. But again, what I was trying to do in that section, really focusing on idolatry and Barbicane, and in the background there is Marshall McLuhan, right? The medium is the message, right? Which is that the medium. McLuhan wrote a book called The Medium is the Message, and then he wrote another book called The Medium is the Massage. Because the medium, he says, is doing stuff to you. It's massaging you, no matter what you're watching, right? And he's talking about print, then he's talking about electronic media in the 60s, right? And now we have digital technology. And it's doing something to us, right? And this is, look at those statistics in the back if you want. We can look at these real quick, and then I'll get more to your question of online evangelization. This is page 8. Since 2010, we've seen a dramatic spike in depression, anxiety, self-harm, especially for girls, and then mental illness. Okay, is that just bad choices? Maybe, right? But it's also something about the nature of the technology that's changed us, right? If you look on the very last page and you look at the decrease in reading and numeracy and literacy, Is that just bad choices, right? Maybe. You know, I mean, you could look at the porn statistics in the middle, which is what a lot of people are doing. So those are bad choices, right? But does that lead directly to reading less? It's the technology changes us. We know it changes the way we think. We talk about it rewiring our brains, right? Even if you use it virtuously, right? It changes us. It changes our attention span. It changes the way we interact. It changes the way we're willing to be interrupted, right? Yeah, some of you old people would know, like if you were at dinner and the phone rang, you didn't answer it. Like that's absurd today, right? Everyone has their phone at the table. It's okay to get dinged at any time, say, oh, sorry, I just gotta take this. This is more important than you before me. Sorry, hold on. And we just accept that, right? So the technology changes us, right? Even if we're not using it in bad ways, right? So the medium is the massage, the medium is the message, right? The medium is doing something to us. It's transforming us. Right? It's taking us in and it's transforming us, no matter how we're using it. Now, if we're using it illicitly, it's changing us even for the worse, more dramatically, but it's changing us no matter what. So, I don't even remember what you asked about online evangelization. Yeah, but online evangelization, right, it has its uses, right? It's great. I've used those videos. I've sent those videos to people. I've been edified by those videos. I listen to them when I wash dishes and things, So, these things can have their uses. But in the end, online evangelization is seriously limited, right? I mean, I think I was listening to one speaker the other day who said the future is going to be, personal connection and not digital reach. Right? And in one way, like, if you look online, pretty much every question you can ask has been answered on the, like, why are Catholics right and Protestants wrong? Okay, like that, like, we have every answer we need, right, online already. Or vice versa, why are Catholics wrong and Protestants right? Right, whatever you want, like, all the answers are online. So it's like a great repository, right? So I don't know, I can look it up, I could send it. But in the end, I think it's still going to be person to person, and that's how people are saved. That's how people come to God.
Thank you, Professor. I'm going to make a little play on open AI, which I'm not even sure what that is. I wonder if you are open to open asceticism. As you were speaking, I wondered about ways of people responding to technology or it not controlling them, like being out in nature, enjoying nature, slow food, whole food, sharing meals, those kinds of things, which come back to some of the things too of nature not just being something to be harnessed, but something to that is a gift from God. Is that fair to think about that, or opening of a sort of interplay of asceticism as withholding, but also focusing on the things that are life-giving?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if you guys would have given me more time, I would have included more things. No, I mean, right, so other things, I mean, I left out, I mean, community, study, right? Getting back to nature, getting your hands dirty, like all of these things, I think are essential, right? I didn't even mention actually digital asceticism, right? Like, getting dumb phones and, getting your kids off screens and things like that. So, right, I mean, I think there's a lot more to do, but I think, I went for the most dramatic one. If I said, oh, we should all take hikes, and that's going to help. But what happens when we go on hikes is we bring our phones with us. People still answer their phone on hikes, and they play music on hikes, and they take pictures with hikes, right? And so it becomes, right, so again, it becomes the medium. Like, were you really there, right? So without pictures, it didn't really happen, right? What's the phrase, right? And then you have to post it to Facebook or Insta, right? Just to show that you did these cool things, right? So it becomes the medium, right, by which we understand and validate our experiences, right? So no, I do think it's actually essential to reconnect with nature, to plant something, to grow something, to do anything, right? To immerse ourselves in real reality. And the very fact that I have to say real reality to distinguish it from our life shows how dominant, right, digital technology is in our imagination, right? Before there was just reality, and now there's like real reality and virtual reality and online. if you do it online, is it real, right? Or is it not real? Is it more real if it happens on Twitter or less real, right? But it becomes so dominant in the way that we understand ourselves, right, that I think these other things are essential. But I think I think any exercise that we can do, any discipline we can do with delight and joy that's embodied and with others, right, is part of the antidote, for sure. As we're pondering the next, someone's pondering the next question, I just reread Brave New World, which is essential reading today. So is Canticle for Leibowitz and pretty much any post-apocalyptic novel, dystopian novel. But Brave New World is the world we're living in and the world we're heading to, right? He couldn't quite envision the digital, but he envisions all the right dynamics. But if you don't know that, there's like a little savage reservation where they have none of the benefits of civilization and technology. And one of the guys from there, for some reason, gets brought back to the civilization. And they try to corrupt him, and he's like a celebrity, and he hates it, and eventually he's like, I want to leave. And they don't let him leave, but they do let him go to the outskirts of town. And so there he practices asceticism, he plants his own food, he rejects all the canned foods and all the other kind of easy things, the protein shakes that they were giving him. And he tries to live this life alone, and then they discover him, and then they come, and then they overwhelm him and corrupt him, and then he kills himself. So when I make this call for asceticism, it's not something we can do alone, right? I mean, if you have no friends, then do it alone. But get some friends, do it together. If you're a student, back there is Exodus and Genesis 90. Sign-ups are open till Monday. Those are the communities we have on campus. Or Practicing the Way, Campus Ministries is doing their own asceticism program as well this year, which is wonderful, right? Get involved with the community, right? Because we need to sustain each other against these temptations.
So you've actually kind of segued into my question, because reflecting upon my own life and relationship with technology, I've only been able to be abstinent from artificial intelligence because of some professors who are very wise and benevolent and don't allow artificial intelligence in their classrooms. And so recognizing this, I don't think that like without this system in place, like preventing me from doing so, I would be able to like stay away from this, because we're often forced into it, like you said at the end of your talk. And so with your comment on how we must do this in community, my question is, how do we talk to the people in our lives about the harms of artificial intelligence? Because my experience is often I talk about it and then they agree with everything I say, and then nothing changes.
Yeah. Again, I think one of the nice things about doing a program like Exodus and Genesis is that there's a rule of life that you have to conform yourself to. When you're making your own rules, it's often easy to break them, right? Or when you think it's a good idea. So, not everyone's ready for this, right? Not everyone's ready to take these steps, But part of what's persuasive to people is your own transformed life, right? I hear a lot of these talks where, people are like, oh yeah, but, we should give up these things. But, but I know I still struggle with it. I still do it. Okay. And it's like, okay, well that, there needs to be integrity behind the message, And again, in one way, we all struggle with this, right? But the more you can actually do it, the more persuasive it becomes. But what's also wonderful is everyone's, especially your generation, is now realizing that this stuff is just poison, there's all these digital detox programs out there. I just found another one called Humanality. It's, of course, online. But anyway, you have to use the online to get offline. But you're already online, so use the online to get offline. But it goes through the harms, and it gives you disciplines. And one of them is just make your phone a gray screen, if you use a gray screen. So delete all the social media apps. That's number one. So take off all the apps except the one, the phone and the text or whatever you need. And then make a gray screen, go to accessibility and make it a gray screen. And you'll find you'll use your phone dramatically less. And then if you do an Exodus or Genesis, one of the disciplines is no frivolous internet use. Otherwise, you have to tell your group, that you used it. And then the transformation is pretty remarkable. It was really interesting. I remember one of the first years we did this, one of the girls was in my class, and it changes the way of seeing. She's like, I'm not using my phone as much because no frivolous internet use, and I deleted all my apps and I gray screened it. And she's like, I noticed how sad my friends are, and I never noticed that before. Right? So you have eyes to see, right? You lose those eyes, right, when you're filled with concupiscence and just seeking yourself and affirmation and dopamine and all the things that the phone does for us. But when you withdraw from that, right, you get your vision back, right, and you can see other people, right, in a way that you hadn't before.
I was kind of looking at, technology as the online part of it, and how are we supposed to, let's say that everyone in this room decides to do a technology detox after, your wonderful talk, and how are we supposed to do that and still go back to work and fulfill our majors and go into, because the whole world is so online and so technology focused, and because technology is everyone says technology is the future is technology. How do
those
you,
people are lying to you.
well, okay, but that's just a common thing that people say. How do you move forward and find success in your career without having this resource that is so commonly used by so many other people in your profession?
Yeah, and it's going to be hard because some people are going to use this and they're going to get ahead of you, right? They're going to write better papers with AI, and the professors are not going to catch it, and they're going to get better grades than you. And same thing at work. People are going to get ahead. So I think there's a few ways that we need to think about this. So one is because these things are imposed upon us, and you have to remember, we didn't choose a lot of this, right? It just is put, now AI is everywhere. It's on all of our emails. It's on every search engine. It's on everything that we use. It's even summarizing emails, all sorts of weird things. So these things sometimes will become regimes of necessity, right? It's hard. 20 years ago, we lived without phones perfectly fine. It's amazing. Talk to any old person in this room. What did you do before phones? I read books on the bus, and I actually read books when I'd walk down the street, So there's other ways to live, but they do become regimes of necessity. You can't live without a credit card now. You can't live without electricity now, right? If electricity went out, my family would freeze to death. Right, we'd have no place to even burn. We have no wood, and we have no place to burn it. Right, these are regimes of necessity. Right, so in some ways, right, there may come a point where we have to use it in some way. Right, but we're not there at this point. Right, and if you look at one of these digital detoxes, or just examine your own heart and your own practice, and you can look at your phone, and it'll tell you what you spend time on, and you can say, which of these are essential for me? Which one of these are part of my work? Which one of these are part of my duties? You're a student. If you want to glorify God, do your homework, right? Right? So which one of these are glorifying God, And then you can say, okay, well, 2 hours of this is actually glorifying God because it's part of my homework, and then 6 hours of this is just me goofing around and wasting time, And maybe 1 hour is me calling my mom. Okay, that's glorifying God too. So you have to do that kind of examine and say, all right, what can I weed out? Where's the discipline? And then what's actually essential use? The interesting thing is these silicone. So I remember there was that interview with Steve Jobs, and they said, he's like, well, what do your kids think of the new iPhone 6 or whatever it was? And he's like, oh, I don't give my kids that. Yeah, right. Every drug dealer, right, in the world, right. You push it on other people's kids, you protect your own kids from it, right? These guys in Silicon Valley, they send their kids to Waldorf schools, to dumb schools, tech-free schools. Those are going to be the leaders of the world because they're free. They want you to be slaves. That's why it's free. That's why ChatGPT is free. That's why you get the student version for free. It's not because they love you. They want to make you addicted so that when you get out of here, you can't think without it. And so the choice before you is, am I going to let these drug dealers give me these drugs? Am I going to take them and become addicted for the rest of my life? Or am I going to be free? Right? And you have to decide, right? And right, and if you have a job that says you have to use this, then right, okay, you decide, do I want that job? Or you say, okay, I'll use this at work, right, for these people, because I have to provide for my family, and then I won't use it in other places, right? Right? It may become a necessity for some of us at some point, right? And God will understand that. But we don't have to let these people fool us and addict us. Probably have time for maybe one more question, Jack. What do you think? Mm-hmm.
Hello. I just wanted to ask if you think there is some good use out of it, maybe for modern medicine, agriculture, things like that, for artificial intelligence.
Are there any good uses for it? Yeah, I mean, there probably are, I'm sure. And with all these things, I mean, there will be good. I mean, you know, they say they can scan, you know, for breast cancer now, like, and they can predict it 5 years ahead of time. You know, like, that's amazing. That's wonderful. You know, we've benefited from this kind of advanced technology in our own family. My mother has had cancer, right? And so, you know, so knowing this 5 years ahead of time will be wonderful, right? So, you know, there are going to be good uses that come from this, right? And that's also what makes these discussions so hard. And it's also why we don't get rid of this phone, right? It's because, well, it has these good uses. But that's the thing is, the good use comes with a whole package. You know, I mean, if you want to get a really kind of 10,000-foot view of all of how this, one account of how this works, Paul Kingsnorth, Against the Machine, it's in the recommended reading in the handout. He just talks about how all these things conspire, right? So on the one hand, yeah, we make more food than ever before, and we could feed more people, but it turns out it's like much worse food, and it's making us sick. You know, and you can't have small farmers anymore, and now everyone lives in cities, and we know that when people live in cities, they're actually unhappier for lots of reasons. They're not connected to nature, and they live more artificial lives. And okay, so right, these goods are always, at least the way the goods are talked about, they're material goods, and there will be material goods that can come from this. Supposedly, it's going to make, of course, billionaires super richer, and maybe make America so much money that we don't have to work anymore, right? And maybe that'll be a good thing, and maybe it'll be a disaster. What are people going to do with their free time? Well, I could tell you what people do with their free time right now, if you want to look on page 8 and 9. Look at the rise of AI boyfriends and girlfriends. So, is there going to be good things that come from this? Of course there is, right? And if you are one of the people who has to use it, right, I pray to God that you're using it to do one of these good things. But even as you're doing these good things, you have to be aware, this thing is changing me, right? This thing is massaging me. This thing is changing the way I think, the way I understand, the way I view other people, right? The way I understand myself, right? That it's changing me, right? And do I want to be changed in this way? Thank you all for coming.